Hey guys, I am Devisri of second year BA English student of K College Madana. Today we are going to deal with the Tudor dynasty from the third module of Shapers of Destiny. Britannia rules the waves. First king in Tudor dynasty is Henry VII. Tudor dynasty was founded by Owen Tudor, who was a Welsh knight, and he married Catherine of France, the widow of Henry V. His son Edward married Lady Margaret Beaufort, the cousin of Henry VI, and Henry Tudor, Duke of Richmond, was their son. Later, Henry Tudor became Henry VII, and his accession to the throne of England was after the Battle of Bosworth. Henry's claim to the throne of England was fourfold: defeating King Richard III in the Wars of the Roses, the choice of the people and the Parliament, and he had the blessings of the Pope and the Church, and has a strong blood claim to the throne. Henry was a good soldier, but he loved peace more than war. In order to ensure that peace, he married Princess Elizabeth of the House of York, thus bringing the Wars of the Roses to a final end. In his career, he had to face two rebellions. First one was Lambert Simnel, the Earl of Warwick, who escaped from the Tower of London. Another one was Perkin Warbeck, imprisoned in the Tower by Richard III. Henry patronized the rising middle class and gave them important positions in the government. Archbishop Morton was his Archbishop of Canterbury. His most trusted lieutenants were a pair of lawyers, Empson and Dudley, who were of common stock. Henry VII gave great importance to the maintenance of law and order. A special committee of the King's Council called the Court of the Star Chamber was formed in order to keep the barons in order. He passed livery and maintenance law. According to this law, no barons had no right to maintain a private army with a special uniform or livery of that noble house. Henry encouraged trade and commerce. He passed the Navigation Act in 1485, by which goods to and from England can be brought only by English ships that are manned only by English, Irish, or Welsh soldiers. Henry VII built up the English merchant navy, in which the English sailors who manned the ships were not only expert seamen but also capable soldiers. Henry's greatest objective was to maintain unbroken peace inland. As Henry came from a Welsh family, relations with the Welsh became cordial. He made the Scots friendly by marrying his daughter Margaret to James IV of Scotland. He arranged royal marriages to unite many of the important countries of Europe. One such marriage was one arranged by Henry VII for his eldest son Prince Arthur with Princess Catherine of Aragon in Spain. Unfortunately, Prince Arthur, a sickly person, passed away after 5 months, leaving Catherine a widow. In order to protect the dowry she has brought from Spain, Henry got his second son Henry married off to Catherine, thus keeping her dowry safe in England. Henry VII died in 1509, leaving England a rich, united, and a powerful nation. Now let's move on to a major happenings occur during this time, that is the Renaissance. The word Renaissance means rebirth, and it was the rebirth or revival of interest in the world in which man lives. For centuries, religion forced men to believe that the spiritual world is the reality and the physical world is an illusion. Renaissance brought the realization that this world is the reality that man has before him, and inspired him to explore the beauty and truth of this world. Renaissance brought the revival of the ancient Greek and Latin learning and not Christian learning. Man turned away from God and looked into himself and the world around him. Florence was the center of the Italian Renaissance. It was the center of Renaissance where it flourished mainly in the field of art, architecture, and sculpture. The works of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Titian, and Botticelli glorify the strength and beauty of the human body. Now we move on to the development of science during Renaissance period. Copernicus discovered that the Earth is not the center of universe but only a planet in the solar system, and it goes around the sun. Later it was confirmed by Galileo with the discovery of telescope. Next, we move on to the momentous movements of the 15th and 16th centuries, and the first one is humanism. Humanism is the study of all that is concerned with the man as man, not man as a manifestation of God. Even when humanism turned to the study of Christian religion, it attempted to liberate religion from theology and compelled men to read the Bible for themselves. The humanist movement in England was headed by Petrarch, Dean John Colet, Erasmus, and Sir Thomas More. Petrarch is known as the father of humanism. Now let's see some details about Dean John Colet. Dean John Colet was trained in the Academy of Italy. His major work was the interpretations of the St. Paul's ideas. Next famous humanist was Desiderius Erasmus, a Dutch scholar, and his major work was the translation of New Testament. Next is about Sir Thomas More. Sir Thomas More had entered the services of Archbishop Morton as a young boy. His major work is Utopia. Utopia means an ideal land or no land at all. He was admired by King Henry VIII and made as the Lord Chancellor. Now we move on to the scientific inventions during the time of Renaissance. The growth of the scientific spirit was part of the Renaissance movement. During the medieval period, people had an unscientific outlook and they believed that matter consisted of four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And the human mind was controlled by four humors: black and yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. They believed that the earth was the center of the universe and that it was flat and consisted of three landmasses only: Asia, Europe, and Africa. These unscientific ideas were called in question during the Renaissance by the scientific discoveries of Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, and Harvey. And the people gave importance to geometry and idea of proportion. The printing press was the first technological revolution that helped the dissemination of knowledge possible. The treasures of classical literature and the ideas of science transformed the entire human life. The name of Gutenberg and Caxton will be remembered as long as human beings exist as the inventors of communication technology. William Caxton brought printing press to England, and Johannes Gutenberg is known as the father of printing press. Next we move on to the geographical discoveries at the time of Renaissance. In 1487, Bartholomew Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope and Vasco da Gama went further and reached Calicut in Kerala. In 1500, the Portuguese sailor Cabral discovered Brazil in South America. In Henry VII's reign, John Cabot and his son Sebastian Cabot discovered Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and New England in 1498. Sir Walter Raleigh discovered the part of America which he named Virginia after the Virgin Queen Elizabeth. The most popular book at the time was The Principal Navigations, Voyages and Discoveries of the English Nation by Richard Hakluyt, which directed the thoughts of the adventurous youth of scholars, statesmen, and merchants. The discovery of America was followed by the acquisition of Virgin Territories, while the access to India helped to establish trading companies like the Dutch East India Company and English East India Company. Next topic is Reformation in Europe. Reformation was the byproduct of Renaissance. It was an attempt to reveal the truth of the Bible to men and bring it into direct relation with the people without the mediation of the priestly monopoly. Humanists began to question the corruption within the church, which did not give any importance to the joy and gift of life. Reformation in Europe is chiefly associated with Martin Luther. He questioned the corrupt practices of the church and pope. He pasted a charge sheet against the pope on the wall of the church in Wittenberg when Tetzel, the pope's envoy, came to sell indulgences. The pope excommunicated him, but he was supported by the princes of Germany because they hated the tyranny of the pope. Next, we will look into the Protestantism and Calvinism. They are the branches of the general movement of Reformation. The churches that protested against the authority of the Pope became Protestants. John Calvin developed a highly rigid type of Christianity with strict observances and disciplines. In England, Protestantism came late because King Henry VIII was first in favor of the Pope. Now let's see the Reformation in England. Reformation in England was partly King Henry VIII's personal reform. In a wider sense, it is an open confrontation between the church and the state for supremacy. King Henry's appeal to the Pope sanctioning his divorce with Queen Catherine was rejected. In one sense, the Pope acted on principle because the Catholic Church did not allow divorce. In another way, he was afraid of offending Emperor Charles V of France, who was the nephew of Queen Catherine. The king called several sessions of the parliament and passed many acts to make his stand valid. These sessions between 1529 and 1536 was called as a Reformation Parliament. Rules were passed to limit the fees of the clergy for marriage, christenings and other holy ceremonies. Bishops were prevented from maintaining contact with the Pope, and they are not allowed to address the Pope as our Holy Father. Several acts were passed by King Henry VIII. One of such acts was the Act of Succession. According to this act, only the children of Henry and Anne Boleyn had the right to inherit kingship. Another act is the Act of Supremacy, in which the king, the supreme head of the church, and the English church was named as the Church of England. Another act passed by Henry VIII was the Act of Treason. The act said that anyone who criticized the king would become a traitor and would be executed. Now let's move to Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. Cranmer was a priest in the household of Anne Boleyn, King Henry's second queen. Cranmer entered Henry's favor by fully endorsing his decision to marry Anne Boleyn. Henry made him Archbishop of Canterbury, and Cranmer broke off the Church of England from Rome, annulled Henry's marriage with Catherine, and legalized his marriage with Anne Boleyn. He wrote a Book of Common Prayer which was read every day on churches. Now let's see what is Counter-Reformation. Counter-Reformations occurred during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, and it was mainly focused to bring back Catholicism back in England. Jesuit monks Parsons and Campion tried to woo Englishmen to return to the Catholic Church, and they were supported by Pope Pius V. Pope Pius V issued a papal bull excommunicating Elizabeth. Parliament passed an act forbidding conversion to the Catholic faith. Counter-Reformation were involved in the political maneuvers of ousting Elizabeth from the throne rather than in purifying the Catholic Church. Now let's see the next king of the Tudor dynasty, that is Henry VIII. Henry VIII ascended the throne in 1509. When he ascended the throne, he was a lad of 18 and he ruled England for 40 years. His reign was divided into two periods. The first one is premiership of Cardinal Thomas Wolsey and Henry's distinguishing himself as a champion and defender of the Catholic faith and papacy. The second reign is Henry's break with the papacy and the establishment of Protestantism in England. He was titled as Defender of the Faith by Pope as long as he was on the side of the Pope. Henry retained Cardinal Thomas Wolsey as his chancellor so long as he was on the side of the Pope. He got Wolsey out of his way, falsely charging the failure of his French policy on Wolsey's responsibility and for not winning the Pope's consent to get divorced from Catherine. Though returned from his office, he was arrested and fortunately died of fever before death by the king's orders. Sir Thomas More accepted the post of the Chancellor with reluctance and always feared the king's displeasure. He was executed for refusing to accept the Act of Supremacy. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer succeeded Sir Thomas More. He is concerned with the intellectual side of Reformation in England. To carry out the cruder of his wishes, Henry appointed Thomas Cromwell. These are the names of the chancellors at the time of Henry VIII. First, Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, succeeded by Sir Thomas More, succeeded by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer and Thomas Cromwell. Now let's see about Thomas Cromwell. Thomas Cromwell was an intelligent and ambitious man. Henry's decision to break away from Rome was not motivated by any interest in the ideas of Reformation, but as a retaliation to the Pope's unwillingness to annul his marriage with Catherine. Catherine had given birth to many, but none of them survived except Mary. Henry wanted to have a son to succeed him and decided to marry Anne Boleyn, but she also gave birth to a daughter. He got rid of her by executing her. Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour, died of childbirth, but gave him the son he desired. His fourth marriage with Anne, the sister of the Duke of Cleves, also ended in disaster because Henry disliked her and executed his servant Thomas Cromwell, who arranged the marriage. His marriage with Catherine Howard, cousin of Anne Boleyn, was also ill-fated, which ended in beheading of Catherine on suspicion of chastity. His last wife was Catherine Parr, who managed to bear Henry's tantrums and nursed him to the end. Henry died in 1547. Though despotic and self-willed, Henry had always the support of the people because he gave them peace. Henry's attitude to his neighbors, Wales, Ireland, and Scotland, was aimed at wooing their friendship. Henry's interest in the navy made England a strong maritime power. He built a large fleet of ships armed with guns that later helped the conquest of colonies. Dissolution of the monastery during Henry VIII. The most notorious event during Henry VIII's reign was the dissolution of the monasteries. It was a callous and senseless act of cruelty. Henry's attack on such property was mainly due to three reasons. The first one was monasteries had alliance to the Pope. The second one, the wealth of the monasteries were a great attraction to the king. And the third one was many of the monks had become corrupt. Thomas Cromwell was appointed as Vice-Chancellor with the power to enter any monastery in England. The property of the monasteries were confiscated, the monks were thrown out. No step was taken to rehabilitate them. The libraries and artworks were looted and burned down. The beautiful artifacts of Catholic churches were destroyed in the name of idol worship. The monks who put any resistance were instantly put to death. Trials were dispensed with, all resistance was suppressed. The wealth of the monasteries was added to the king's treasury or distributed among the middle class who supported him. Thomas Cromwell was a terrible person at this time, and he was nicknamed as Hammer of the Monks. The wealth of the monasteries were added to the king's treasury or distributed among the middle class who supported him. Now we move on to the next king during Tudor dynasty, and it is Edward VI. During the time 1547 to 1553. Edward VI is the son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour. He was a boy of 10 when he ascended the throne of England. He was a sickly child and ruled the country with the help of protectors. Edward Seymour, the Duke of Somerset, was his first protector. He considered many of the laws imposed by Henry as being very harsh, and he replaced many of them. Edward Seymour, the first protector, incurred the displeasure of the gentry by opposing the gentry who enclosed large tracts of land for sheep farming. The farmers rose in protest against the enclosure but were promptly suppressed. Parliament ordered the deposition of Somerset, who was imprisoned in the Tower. The next protector was John Dudley, the Earl of Warwick. He continued the destruction of churches and confiscation of their wealth. The land did not enjoy peace or security. The death of Edward in 1553 ended the rule of the Protector, and the Council of Ministers chose Mary, the eldest daughter of Henry VIII, as Queen. Thus Mary Tudor, or Queen Mary, was crowned the first independent Queen of England in 1553. She was the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of France. She was an ardent Catholic, and she wishes to bring back Catholicism in England. The protector of Edward, Warwick, was arrested and executed. She forced the Parliament to repeal the Act of Uniformity in order to restore Catholic service. Protestant priests, including Archbishop Cranmer, were arrested and sent to the Tower. Her decision to marry the Catholic King Philip of Spain was not accepted by the people of England. She believed that by marrying him, she could bring back Catholicism in England. Resistance against Mary's attempt to restore Catholic faith ended in the martyrdom of great men like Latimer and Cranmer. She came to be nicknamed as Bloody Mary. The Book of Martyrs by John Foxe inspired hatred against Rome. Mary became unpopular with her suppression of Protestant faith. England lost her only possession of Calais. As a devout Catholic, she had to obey the Pope's request to send an English army to fight along with France against Spain, which was against her own husband. France won the war, and England lost her self-respect and the port of Calais. Queen Mary succumbed to ill health, and the Council of Ministers wrested from her consent to name her half-sister Elizabeth as Queen of England. Thus, Queen Elizabeth became the next Queen in England. Elizabeth is the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. She ruled England for 45 years. Elizabeth became Queen of England at the age of 25. Ever since the execution of her mother Anne Boleyn, she had been in fear of her own life. Her cautious nature helped her to make herself to become most popular, most accepted, and the greatest queen of England, the Gloriana, as Spencer named her. Elizabeth remained unmarried throughout her life. Her only love was England. With the wisdom of her grandfather Henry VII and the boldness of her father Henry VIII, she managed to make England the powerful nation in Europe. Elizabeth was a Protestant, but she had no fanatic hatred of Catholic religion. She was tolerant and succeeded in strengthening the Protestant faith of her people. She did not live to create any religious matters. Queen was helped and protected by faithful lieutenants, and they were William Cecil and Sir Francis Walsingham. Cecil advised her on all state affairs guided by a policy of moderation. Walsingham was in charge of her personal protection. He kept a watchful eye on her enemies, especially the Catholics who hatched several plots against her, and all were spoiled. There were many dangers against Elizabeth's position as queen. The Catholic Spain claimed that the English throne belonged to their King Philip by his marriage to Mary. The Pope believed that Elizabeth was the illegitimate daughter of her father and her claim to the throne was not valid, and the kingdom should go to Mary Stuart, the Queen of Scotland and the great granddaughter of Henry VII. Mary was a Catholic, but the Scottish people were Protestant and guided by their leader John Knox. She was married off to Francis II of France. In 1561, she returned to Scotland after the death of her husband. Her overhasty marriage with the Earl of Bothwell, who was suspected of killing her first husband, which turned the people of Scotland against her. Bothwell was killed, the queen was captured and imprisoned at Lochleven Castle. She was forced to abdicate, and her infant son James was crowned as James IV of Scotland. Elizabeth's position as queen faced many threats. In the north of England, Earls Northumberland and Westmoreland plotted to overthrow her and put Mary in her place, but the plot was unearthed and the leaders executed. Another plot to oust Elizabeth was hatched by Anthony Babington, a Jesuit priest, and had the blessings of Mary. When a letter of Mary was intercepted, revealing the secret, she was arrested and sentenced to death. Though Elizabeth did not like to shed the blood of her cousin, she was compelled to sign the order of her execution. With the death of Mary, Queen of Scots, the Catholic plots ended once and for all. The danger from Philip of Spain always existed. Elizabeth was cautious and avoided any confrontation with Spain, which was a greater power. But she availed every opportunity to dismay Philip. She encouraged the Netherlands, who were England's partners in wool trade, to revolt against Spain. She also turned a blind eye on the piracy carried out by the English sailors on the Spanish galleons loaded with gold. Now we will see who is Sir Francis Drake. Sir Francis Drake was the most famous of English pirates in the sea and the one who brought much gold and precious wealth to Queen Elizabeth the treasure. He was trained by his cousin John Hawkins, who traded in slaves to the colonies. Drake led several adventures in his ship, the Golden Hind. He was supported by many shareholders, among whom the Queen was one. Drake sailed to South America and raided the rich Spanish ports. From there, he brought loads of gold that went into the treasury of the Queen. Philip of Spain complained against Drake to the Queen, but she flouted the Spanish king by heaping reward on Drake. Philip answered her by laying an embargo on all English ships in Spanish ports. Elizabeth struck back by ordering Drake to conduct raids on Spanish colonies. He attacked several Spanish colonies and laid them waste. Wherever he went, he was victorious. Now we are moving on to a greatest victory in England, that is the defeat of the Spanish Armada. The Spanish Armada was a fleet of about 150 warships sent by King Philip of Spain to conquer England. Elizabeth has not only refused Philip's proposals but offended him by supporting the pirate Francis Drake. Philip decided to attack England to prove his strength and sent an armada of fighting ships. The expectations of Philip failed because the armada was not efficient to fight the English warships. The Spanish ships have only light artillery. The English fleet consisted of light ships that carried heavy artillery. The sailors were also trained soldiers. The English ships made quick attacks and retreated for safety. For 1 week, the English ships made continuous attack on the Spanish ships. Finally, the Spanish ships anchored at the port of Calais Roads. Drake sent fireships that threw burning torches on the enemy. In shame, they retreated on the Irish coast. Many vessels sank and the others drifted into the open sea. They made a last attempt but were thwarted by the English galleys. The Armada retreated to Ireland, and out of 150 ships, only 50 returned to Spain. The defeat of the Armada was a great blow to Spain. It boosted the morale of the English, and the Queen felt triumphant. It was an event that gave England an unchallenged place in European politics. Now we move on to the next topic, that is the advisors of Elizabeth. The success of Queen Elizabeth depended to a great extent on the ability and unselfish service of some of her ministers. The chief among them was Sir William Cecil, who was her faithful friend for 40 years. She trusted on him implicitly, and he was faithful to the extreme. Her trust in him was so great that he made his son his successor in service. The other minister who was her intimate was Sir Francis Walsingham. He kept a secret service that spied on the activities of the Queen's political enemies. Many plots were detected in time and spoiled. All the Queen's personal safety was managed by this able minister. Sir Walter Raleigh and Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, were men whom she showed a watchful admiration. She praised Sir Walter Raleigh's poems, but suspected the extravagant terms of praise. He established an English colony in America, which he called Virginia, in honor of the Virgin Queen. The Earl of Essex was young and handsome. His ready wit and gallantry pleased her. His expedition against Spain strengthened her admiration for the young man. But his Irish expedition ended in the displeasure of the Queen because he left the army in Ireland without carrying out the intended conquest. He was arrested and his property was confiscated. Essex tried to turn the people of London against the Queen but failed. He was arrested and executed on the charge of treason. The period of Queen Elizabeth I represents the beginning of the modern period in several ways. The wars that destroyed men and property for years came to an end, and men could live peacefully and devote their time to create activities, trades, commerce, etc. Feudalism and feudal barons were things of the past. The whole country united into a single nation under the strong rule of a benevolent despot. The church also ceased to be a powerful institution to get into rivalry with the rulers. Companies like the East India Company, with capital investment from shareholders, became a new institution that promoted trade and commerce. The gold that came from Americas by way of piracy and capture added to the wealth of the nation and later provided capital for further overseas expansion. The colonization of America and of India were destined to change economic and social life tremendously in the coming days. The statute of artificers made it compulsory for people to do agricultural work and other industries. The poor law also helped the destitute to find shelter and food. Elizabethan period came to be known as the nest of singing birds, referring to the extraordinary development in literature and in poetry. All the literary forms made familiar by the Renaissance were experimented. Lyrical poetry was the first to flourish. Sonnets and reflexive poems were produced by the poets like the Earl of Surrey and Sir Thomas Wyatt, introducing Englishmen to the beauty of lyric poetry. A collection called Tottel's Miscellany, which appeared in 1557, was the pathbreaker in the lyric poetry composed by these poets. Sonnet became a highly fashionable verse form in which all the major poets tried their inventive powers. Sir Philip Sidney and Spenser were the first poets to write sonnet sequences on the model of the sonnet sequences of the Italian poets Petrarch and Dante. Philip Sidney's Arcadia is a pastoral romance, and his Apology for Poetry is the first full-length essay in literary criticism in English. His sonnet sequence is called Astrophel and Stella. Spenser's sonnets are named Amoretti. He also wrote the first epic poem in English, The Faerie Queene. It is an elaborate allegory with moral and political undertones. His shorter poems, Prothalamion and Epithalamion, two spousal songs, are also rich with poetic beauty. Sir Walter Raleigh was also a courtier, soldier, and poet like Sir Philip Sidney. He married one of Queen Elizabeth's maids of honor, for which he was sent to the Tower. Richard Hakluyt's Voyages and Discoveries of the English Nation was a famous book during this time. John Lyly's Euphues was a prose romance written in a highly rhetorical style, and it is known as Euphuism. Another interesting startup during the Elizabethan period was the Elizabethan Theatre. The Elizabethan Theatre was partly open air and partly roofed and covered. The central yard was unroofed, where the groundlings, the ordinary people, sat on the ground or stood in crowd. This was surrounded by tiers of covered galleries where the upper classes had their seat. There was a tall structure called the tiring house, the green room for the actors. A large platform projected in the midst of the audience which formed the stage. This made the intimacy between the actors and the audience real. There was no drop curtain or painted scenery, which was compensated by descriptions interpolated in the dialogue of the actors. Now let's see about Elizabethan drama. Both tragedy and comedy developed simultaneously during this period. Farcical plays like Ralph Roister Doister by Nicholas Udall and the anonymous Gamergutten's Needle marked the beginnings of the popular comedy. Gorboduc by Thomas Aquila and Thomas Norton was the first tragedy in blank verse and university wits, and they are the first commercial playwrights. And they were Thomas Lodge, George Peele, Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, and Thomas Nash. Christopher Marlowe is the greatest of Shakespeare's predecessors. His genius is imprinted on the poetic medium, blank verse, and the tragical pattern of his plays. Marlowe deliberately rejected the kingly heroes and projected heroes from ordinary ranges of life. Tamburlaine the Great and Edward II are the work of Christopher Marlowe, and it tells the tales of conquerors who overthrew traditional kingship. The Jew of Malta has as hero a businessman, which is also another work of Christopher Marlowe, and Dr. Faustus projects a scholar who wants to transcend the limits of knowledge and woos black magic to gain infinite power. William Shakespeare is one of the greatest dramatist poets of the Elizabethan period, who enriched English literature with no less than 37 plays of the highest literary merit and widest popular appeal. His plays are a treasure house of all human knowledge, experience, and emotions, a blend of supreme poetry and most natural prose. He has made masterpieces in all kinds of drama, comedy, tragedy, romance, historical plays. His historical plays cover the period between Richard II to Henry VII and include Henry VI, Richard III, Henry IV, and Henry V. The tragedies are his greatest plays that reveal his poetic power at its highest. Othello, Macbeth, King Lear, Hamlet are some of the greatest tragedies written by William Shakespeare. The romances include Pericles, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. The last person we have to discuss in Tudor dynasty is Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson was a contemporary of Shakespeare who wrote realistic comedies, whereas Shakespeare's plays are romantic comedies and tragedies. Every Man in His Humor, Every Man Out of His Humor, Walpin, Epicon, The Alchemist, and Bartholomew Fair are Ben Jonson's comedies. This is an overview of the whole Tudor dynasty. Hope you all understood about Tudor dynasty. Thank you for watching and listening.